Yeah, I unmute myself.
Yeah. Probably, are you going to speak from there or
We're just bringing like this here.
here?
Yes, yeah. I we put the computer in front of us.
Yeah.
Everything's good. Everything's right. Should we start or should I wait for Martha? Martha here? Yeah.
Speaking with speaker. Du hast keine.
This is watching the screen. Is that okay? So. Okay. Welcome everyone to our first paper section, presentation of papers, and the title of this session is Data Privacy and Technology Ethics. So we tried to put the papers together. In this section, it was a very hard task because we had like a very diverse set of submissions. And this first paper called Democratizing AI with Purpose Limitation for Models is going to be presented by Rainer Müller, Anna Buschmeier, University Osnabrück and University Hagen. And without further ado, I'll give it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I can speak for the both of us that we are very happy to be here and to present the product of our longer research collaboration between ethics and law. And our proposal is democratizing AI with purpose limitation for models, which stems from the fact that we think trained AI models should be the object of preventive legal regulation. From our point of view, the risk of trained AI models not only arising from data processing and systemic risk, etc., is not very public. In the debate of scholarship and politics and so on, we heard a lot about the risk in the keynotes, but you did not mention the risk of the secondary use of trained models. This is where we jump in now. So our proposal is to establish a purpose limitation for trained AI models. What does this have to do with democratizing AI? We think the focus of democratizing AI should be on balancing power asymmetries instead of democratizing whatsoever called AI technology itself. So the idea is that democratizing AI can be fulfilled by effective regulation. We all know that implementing stakeholders and the progress, which is often discussed in the context of democratizing AI, is quite hard. You know, to get people to participate, even in voting democratic processes, is hard enough as well, but also other kinds of stakeholder implementation in developing and deploying technology. So our focus is on regulation because we think it democratizes AI if we implement effective regulation in democratic processes. This enables democratic decision about context and the purposes of AI models and leads to our goal, the balancing of power asymmetries. So why is this a problem and why should we tackle this with a regulatory proposal? There are societal impacts and misuses of AI models, not only of the context of application, but of the models itself. So we really want to focus on the trained AI models, the product, not the training data, but the product. I brought to you some current examples of the risk of AI. We have a wide mix between public and private deployment of AI systems. We have generative AI and other kinds of AI. In our previous work, we discussed a lot about the problems of predictive analytics, for example, prediction models, which is widely implemented today. But we have discriminatory problems, we have epistemic problems, and we have the systemic risk that we were already talking about. And we want to focus especially on the risk stemming from the secondary use of AI models. So if you have a purpose for which the AI model is trained in the first place, that is a good purpose, a welcome purpose. It can be misused in a secondary data use when you contribute the model to some other purpose. You can sell it to somebody else, it can be misused. And this is addressed in the example of the private UK health data, which was donated for medical research and was then shared with insurance companies.
Yeah, we developed our proposal on the model case of predictive analytics, although it applied also to generative AI. Maybe that's the opportunity to remind ourselves that AI is not equal to generative AI, which is the hot topic right now, but AI has been there and has been in place and in operation for longer. And in a much more pervasive way. So many people are confronted daily with AI-based decisions or AI that makes differences in our lives. It doesn't have to be generative AI systems. And I think a very fundamental model case of what AI is in this current hype of AI, in this current summer of AI since the mid-2010s is predictive modeling, that you can use existing data to predict or to estimate information that you don't have. So typically, for functional characterization of these AI systems, yeah, let's not talk about the algorithms. We don't need to open these black boxes, but we can, it suffices to functionally characterize them. And what we mean by a predictive system or predictive modeling is that it's basically a machine, the blue box here, where you input some data that you have, let's call it auxiliary data about a person, about a case, and it calculates or estimates information that you want, for instance, about a person or a case. Information that you want, but can not obtain, or it's harder to obtain that information compared to obtaining the auxiliary data. It is maybe one question how you do this, but as I said, let's not look at the internals, but let's rather ask who will be in the position to do this. And you are typically in the position to do this when you're a big data company. So this is not something everybody can do, but you need to be in a certain powerful, economically powerful position. Typically, you are a big data company, let's say, in this case here, a social media platform. I would say it's a very typical case applying to many, many examples that companies collect the auxiliary data of all their users, and some of the users also provide the target information, yeah, the red squares here. So the green squares correspond to data points of the auxiliary data for each of the users, and the red squares correspond to the sensitive data points. And there are some users providing both. And it might be a minority, let's say information. Let's say here in that case, it's visualized as information on your sexual identity. Some people provide that on a platform. It might be only 10%, but if you have that, you can use that as a training data set to create a predictive model. And once you've done that, regardless of accuracy, yeah, you will not publicly disclose the accuracy of that model, but you will apply it to all the other users of your platform who did not choose to provide that information, but you will be able to derive that information about them. And I would say that this idea of predicting information or future movements or behavior or next words in a sentence, or next tokens in a sequence of tokens, is at the core of most of AI that we're seeing today, including, for instance, stuff like language models. And we say that this principle comes with a fundamental risk, which is that risk of secondary use of trained models. And to show you why this is risky, or what actually is the risk, let's look at two examples. Example one is, it's a very realistic but schematic example. Imagine you are a clinical research unit at a university hospital, for instance, you're a psychiatry research unit. You have lots of patients and lots of patient data on your patients, on your psychiatric patients. And let's say one of your team members comes up with that brilliant idea of researching into the possibility of predicting psychiatric diseases from audio data. That's very, very realistic. Actually, there are even companies doing that, predicting psychiatric diseases or other diseases from audio data, not from what you say, but from how you say, right? How you speak, from your voice. What will you do if you're a clinical researcher? By the way, your idea is to improve diagnosis. It's a good purpose in a sense. You want to speed up clinical diagnosis. So that is your research proposal. You hand it in at the ERC for research funding. And what you need is of course, voice recordings from your patients, so that you would be able to detect correlations between the medical data and the voice data. So you will ask some of your patients to donate voice data, to voluntarily opt into the recording of the voice data, so that you can do this modeling study. You get some of these patients, you guarantee them that their data will be anonymized. First thing you do, you anonymize the whole data as far as you can. I mean, how can you anonymize voice? And then you try to use machine learning methodology to train a model that can predict psychiatric disease from voice recordings to, in the end, produce a medical device that speeds up diagnosis in the clinical setting. Let's say you apply state-of-the-art anonymization techniques not only to the training data, which is hard in the case of voice data, but at the stage of model training. For instance, differential privacy in machine learning, federated learning techniques, and so on, so that you can guarantee, let's assume you can guarantee that the model, the trained model and the data, the weights of the connections here, that if you consider the trained model as a piece of data, that this is anonymous data, then you can resell that data, right? It's anonymous data protection regulation doesn't apply. So you have this anonymized data which constitutes the trained model, and you will be able to circulate that model to other areas and to other purposes. For instance, to the insurance industry, who wants to score people calling their hotline, are they likely having a disease? Or imagine you are a startup building AI assistants for job applications, like application interviews, and imagine you plug that trained model into your AI system that risk scores job applicants. That is the secondary use scenarios we are looking at. And to see why this is currently unregulated largely, it's important to see that there are different steps of data processing. The one is the collection of the training data and the training of the model. This is the step where certainly the GDPR applies, because the training data is initially not anonymous, but highly personal data. The second step is that you transfer the model, which is anonymous data, if you do it right, to a certain context of use. The primary context, the context that is referenced, for instance, when your ethics council at your university decides whether that research is ethical, that is the primary context that they usually consider. It's like improvement of clinical treatment. But there will be, and in this context, then you might apply the model to a new patient. A new patient runs into your research, into your hospital, and they get diagnosed something by means of that model. So, and in this case, you are dealing with personal information again. Yeah, because you are applying the model to a concrete person and have this kind of reference to that concrete person. But the thing is that the step in between, the step 2, is the transfer of anonymous data, and you can also transfer it to other contexts without currently effective restrictions. The GDPR holds in the beginning step 1 and step 3, but not in the intermediate step. This is basically the scenario that we want to regulate. I hand over back to you.
Thank you. So
I do it here. You talk, I do.
as Rainer already mentioned, there's insufficient legal regulation of this problem at the moment, because we have the models that can be trained from anonymous data or from data that is processed with consent. I mean, usually if the model is trained and applied in a context that is like wishful good context, it promotes research and innovation stuff, people will give their consent. Even if the data is anonymized data, anonymization is seen as data processing under the GDPR, so people will highly likely give their consent to this because this minimizes data processing and emphasis data protection. So we have the unregulated risk of secondary data use of trained models in other contexts, and we also have this problem in anti-discrimination law. So if you have an unregulated secondary use of the trained models, you don't have any victims that can be identified because they don't even know that they are subject to the trained model. So this is a structurally enforcement deficit, which also applies in data protection law, where we cannot identify the individual data subjects anymore. This is a general problem of big data and AI in data protection law, but it also applies to anti-discrimination law, and it's explicitly present in the context of trained models and secondary data use. So if you just look 1 second at the legal details, this is Article 5 and 6 of the GDPR. There is the principle of purpose limitation in data protection law. This is a very old principle. It was already present in the directive and even further along and so on. So personal data shall be collected for a defined purposes. And under some circumstances for Article 6, paragraph 4, you can process the data further for other purposes, but they need to align with the original purposes. So the idea behind the principle of purpose limitation under data protection law is that data subjects have control and transparency over their data. For what purposes are your personal data processed? And this is like undermined by the possible trading of trained models and secondary data use when we have the step of anonymizing data in the second step. So this like breaks the chain of GDPR regulation and also reminds the 3 steps. We have different data subjects on each side. The data subjects that are in the training data are not the same data subjects the model is applied to in the end. So the patients may not be the ones who are the subject of the job application algorithm. So the idea of the GDPR that we have individual rights which people can enforce and pursue does not work anymore if we have different data subjects on every site. So this is a problem that is not regulated by the GDPR. It's not regulated by the European provisions about anonymous data. We have the free flow of anonymous data directive. This does not address the problem. And we do not have a sufficient regulation about training data of models. So we want to shift the proposal of the regulatory object away from the data processing to the trained model.
Yes, and so our proposal is purpose limitation for models. As Anna just said, purpose limitation is already there in data protection by applying the input data, but we want to look at the model data, so the data that represent the trained models. And the basic idea, I think, is initially best framed as an ethical idea and not as an extension of purpose limitation as it is now in data protection. I think it's a new form of data purpose limitation. And the proposal is that we should really look at the purposes for which we build and then employ models. So predictive capacities to predict information about cases or individuals. And we should have a debate, and it should be a democratic debate and oversight, and it should be democratic oversight on the list of purposes that we as the polis want models to be used and not to be used. And we should have a mechanism that ensures that the model, a model that is once built, stays with that purpose. Yeah, that's the idea of purpose is binding. Yeah, I would say that there are even two sub-proposals involved in that proposal. The one is that there should be a mechanism that makes sure that a model that is being trained can only be trained or will only be trained when the entity states the purpose in advance and gets approval for that purpose, and then the model gets trained and the model stays with that purpose. So it's, of course, a huge enforcement debate that we need to also have in connection to that proposal. But from the ethical perspective, it's really looking preventatively at the purposes. So the idea is that the production and use of AI models must be limited to specified purposes that must be stated ex ante and enforced throughout the life cycle of the model.
Yes, the preventive aspect is also the close connection to fundamental rights dogmatics from law, and this is how you can justify a legal proposal for this regulation. So the first step for the purpose limitation of models would be a transparency register. This is also discussed in the AI Act, but not for purpose limitation, but only for the high-risk models that are regulated under the AI Act. But maybe this transparency register could be combined with our idea of purpose limitation. So the infrastructure theoretically could also already be there. When the AI comes into place, you could also think about whether the AI office should be the regulatory body that oversees and maybe decides about the purpose limitations. So you first need to register your model and you need to name the purpose you want to use your model for. So this would already be a great advantage compared to the current situation, because at the moment we don't know who, for what purpose, in which extent is using models. And these models are risk for individual, collective, and societal rights, and it's justified to regulate them. The ex-ante regulation is necessary because we need some kind of prevention, right? I mean, when the damage is already done, it's very hard to regulate ex post. At the current situation, we have a lot of ex post regulation on AI. We have liability, etc., but we have no really functioning ex ante regulation. So this stems from the principle of proportionality. This is a principle in European constitutional law. The regulation has to be appropriate in relation to the purpose achievement. Here, democratizing AI and minimizing risk for individual, society, and collective interest in relation to the rights affected and the depth of the interference, so the extent of the restriction. This would be the freedom of the companies that develops those models and so on. And you can see we are targeting the big actors, right? This is not regulating small and medium enterprises because their models are not that much as a risk to society and individuals as the big ones. So we don't think that this would be not proportionate. And there's also this idea, and it's currently discussed also at the union level, that there should be a regulation for the European data health space, and they name explicit purposes for the secondary use of data in very specific contexts. We just want to transfer this idea to a general purpose limitation of models, that you cannot resell research data, medical data for economic purposes. So this is the last slide. What about the AI Act? This is very prominent discussion in law, so I want to say 2 sentences about that. The risk qualification under the AI is happening according to the intended purposes in Article 6, and this is why the AI Act has so much trouble with foundation models, because you cannot formulate the intended purposes beforehand. There are new amendments from the Parliament referring to the amount of data, general capabilities, independence of its purposes. We think this is a step in the right direction. It could be also implemented in our proportionality test. but there's a lack of addressing the imbalance of power and the vulnerability of certain persons or groups. I already mentioned the role of private standardization organizations, but what is, even if a system is classified as high risk, what is the consequence of the AI Act? There are mostly procedural requirements for high risk systems. There's the focus on the model itself, not the context, and there is no purpose limitation. So we think that this does not moderate adequately the responsibility between developers, the employers, and users, because we think we should target the entities that are powerful and that use this power for their own interest, and this could happen via a purpose limitation for models. So I already mentioned the approach of European data health space proposal, and of course we already talked about the systemic risk of the DSA, which is an assessment that also could be transferred to the risk assessment, whether a model should be registered in our purpose limitation based and basic subject regulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the nice presentation. We have 5 minutes for questions. So are there any questions from the audience? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So I got correctly the point you're doing that is that there is a difference between data and models and how they are regulated. So you have some regulation on data, the purpose limitation, but you don't have it in the model, and you want to do that, like to extend it to the model itself. Like technically speaking, I guess it's not, and not from law side, no house regulation.
Congrats.
Would you say something like the model itself, it's some kind of data when it gets, let's say, replicated? Because I mean, the parameters themselves,
Exactly.
transformation.
Exactly.
So what's missing in the law right now is the data kind.
You are absolutely right. So the trained model is a set of data. Sorry, where was the slide? Here. The input, the training data comes from other people, and there is regulation. And then you do the training, use the training algorithms, and that will be the trained model. And the trained model, it will be a large data set, right? A large matrix of weights of internal parameters of the trained model. And once you've done training, you can discard the training data. And if you did the training well in terms of anonymization, there are algorithms ensuring anonymization in that process of training the model. For instance, preventing against membership attacks or reverse engineering of the training data points from the model data. If you did that well, then you can fully claim that this data is an anonymous data, an anonymous piece of data, to which data protection does not apply anymore.
Okay.
And the proposal is that data should be the objective of regulation and not only the input data.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the question. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, so this may be clarification for currency. So when I think about the AI Act, many people refer to it as like a horizontal legislation, just when it comes to like the risk levels. But then when you, as you said, look at it, the division is pretty vertical to me, right? It's like purpose, like areas and this, we cannot do circuit scoring and so on and so forth. So maybe it's elaborate a little bit more on your last slide, like, don't you see that as a form of purpose limitation? Because there's maybe under certain purposes under which it cannot be used or should be regulated for. And if not, is your argument more concerned with regulating purposes or the repurposing of certain concepts?
I think that's an interesting debate also between the two of us. Do you want to know the question?
I can start, maybe you can add something. Okay, so the problem with the AI Act is, yes, you could read it in the way that it's about purposes, but I think it's not, because they say that the intended purpose is the yardstick for whether it's a high-risk system or not. But if you look at the areas of the high-risk system, they are super broad. It's like education. So it's not really narrowing down to purposes, whether you want to use it to like perform predictive analytics on your students and exclude them from specific courses, or if you want to use it for a purpose that is good for education or the common good. So I think it's not really about purposes, but the contexts are like defined like very broad and too broad. So there are no nuances. And the other thing is, the AI Act stops with the first purposes that is named, right? So it doesn't address the situation that you say, okay, you know, my intended purposes is to use this in education, then it's a high-risk system, but we are in conformity with the standards, so we don't have any problem. This is not object of regulatory oversight, because here's our checklist of the standards. And now we are defining another purpose. We are reusing and then you're selling the model for this other purpose. The step which follows after the first purpose is not regulated by the AI, and this is what we are addressing.
Yeah. And I think it's a crucial difference whether you regulate purposes or the limitation to the purpose that has been stated.
Yes.
And in our team, I'm the one more calling for, or I don't even, whatever. I think for me, it's very important to only make sure that the model doesn't go here or there, even if this purpose is a high-risk purpose. Yeah, even if the primary purpose is high-risk. I mean, there will and should be high-risk systems for sure. We don't want to forbid them. But we want to make sure that they stay with that company and that purpose. Yeah, if Facebook builds targeting models for their advertising on their platform, I don't want these models to be second used in insurance industry, which happens, by the way, with Facebook's targeting models. This is a shadow business case of Facebook that I think should be ruled out by such a, because then they will have to stick with that purpose. It cannot go to another purpose.
Yeah, and also one last comment. It's also a problem of responsibility, because if you say, okay, so this is the high-risk model of Facebook, yeah, and there's another high-risk model of the insurance company, which could also fall under the AI Act. The AI Act does not cover the connection between Facebook and the insurance industry. And this is a problem, and this, of course, opens the door for a wide enforcement deficit, because then who is responsible? You know, there's a significant risk on its own in the secondary use and selling of the model, even if you can say, oh, the insurance company has transparency obligations. Oh, and the Facebook has transparency obligations as well. But even under this obligations of the AI Act, the operators are not asked to disclose that they secondary use the model. This is the problem, and we don't think that this is or will be addressed by the AI Act. Nice. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Let's thank our speakers again.
Thank you.
The next speaker, presenting, we're doing a bit of high.
Just real tight on time.
I think I should be 5 minutes.
You're doing it. You use this as notes to present from there.
Okay, so the next paper, I mean, the title already gives us much of an introduction of the topic, right? Your body should not belong to the internet, online body integrity in the world of deepfake pornography, presented by Lindsay Scott from the University of Cambridge. Thanks very much, and
Thank you. Hi, yeah, my name is Lindsay Scott. I'm studying for a Master's in AI Ethics at the University of Cambridge. I'm not full-time in academia. I actually work full-time as a software engineer, which I mentioned briefly. I've been an engineer in startups for the past 5 years and building and working on high-risk technology, HR technology and recruitment technology in particular. Although I enjoy this very much, working in tech, I've very much seen the bad side and the risk of a ethically under-regulated industry. Self-regulation frightens me a wee bit, and that's what drove me to start my masters. And yeah, study part-time and getting paper selected and being able to present here is a big delight. So thank you. I'm a wee bit hoarse. I lost my voice at the start of this week, so forgive me if I'm quite quiet. Cool. So away from everything that I do in my day job, this paper is quite different. This paper is focusing on the act of deepfake pornography, which is also referred to as NCII, which is non-consensual intimate imagery. In this paper, I'm exploring the relationship between our physical body and our online self. And the most important point of this paper is letting victims' experience inform our understanding of this crime. And to challenge the instinctual categorisations that relate to purely the medium this occurs on, the internet, and let us diminish the impact of this crime. In the paper, I'm proposing a new term, which is online bodily integrity, that I put forward as more fitting language for the gravity of such attacks. In 2019, it was estimated about 96% of deepfake imagery is pornography. And in 2021, Sensitive AI found that non-consensual pornography made up about 90 to 95% of that content. So that's massive. And that was 2021. We've been through several lifetimes in AI development since those statistics. Diffusion models in particular have ballooned. And even though these models have guardrails, stable diffusion, for example, was manipulated to create pornography, I think, within days of its launch. So this is quite a real cutting-edge threat. Everyone in this room is probably familiar with what a deepfake is, but perhaps not the machine learning techniques used to make them. Deepfakes are not produced by diffusion models, they're produced by an advanced deep learning method utilising neural networks called generative adversarial networks. Adversarial is the key word to understand there. There's a generator and a discriminator. The generator's job is to replicate input images, and the discriminator's job is to distinguish between those images. The actual practice of image manipulation has existed since the 18th century. Photoshop has the same capabilities, but deepfakes are a particular threat. The key difference being the accessibility of these technologies and the availability to the general public for free. The skill barrier is significantly lower, and previous image manipulation didn't have the same level of sophistication and believability, and video content is also the big distinguisher there as well. So as I mentioned, you also see this referred to as NCII in places. The practice of creating non-consensual deepfakes is believed to have begun in 2017 with CAIP’23, which was shared and used to create deepfake pornography of celebrities on Reddit forums. In turn, the software was very quickly turned into creating doctored images of individuals known to the perpetrators. Originally uncovered by Samantha Cole, who's a fantastic investigative reporter, primarily working with Vice at the time, and her work led to Reddit banning that practice on their platform. But yeah, this is a cat that's very much already out of the bag. Platform governance is a tricky thing to legislate in regards to images over the internet. Even though deepfakes can be sophisticated, so the main gentle nudge I wanted to kind of like highlight with existing literature is that there's a focus a lot on political deception, which is a real and particularly hot topic. And the vice of deception is, I think, named in basically every paper that I read. The kind of gentle nudge I want to highlight is deception is a key focus. When we contrast this with NCII, Deception often is not the main purpose at all. It's purely humiliation, which can be a side effect of deception, but it's different if it is purely the intent. Even though deepfakes can be sophisticated, it's often blatantly obvious with deepfake porn that it's not real, nor the target in the footage. But that's besides the point. It's also creeping into a lot of victims' testimonies that the lack of deception or the lack of believability is used to discredit their experiences. So a quote from a victim, Blair, who's a Twitch streamer, who said that even though it's not my body, it may as well be. It was the same feeling, a violation that comes with seeing a body that's not yours being represented as yours. And that's from Megan Faruk-Mukesh's article in Wired. And equally as harrowing a tale is Rana Ayyub, who's an Indian journalist. This is quite a famous case, who was targeted with a deepfake pornography campaign as retribution for speaking in defence of a 8-year-old victim of rape in a highly publicised and controversial crime in India. And even though she knew it wasn't herself, she described the physical distress when she faced viewing the deepfake as so severe she was later hospitalised. So what protections do victims have legally? There's specific legislation for revenge pornography, which is using real images non-consensually shared in a handful of countries. You can see the working list from the Centre of Internet and Society on that. Within that, though, there's even less legislation against deepfakes specifically. Between the time actually that I wrote this paper in March and now, the UK does actually have governance against deepfake pornography in the Online Safety Act, which is a chaotic bill, but that is a positive. We'll have to see how that legislation plays out. Legislation for this is really difficult and it's really not a fix-all for a really complicated problem though. Perpetrators not always located in the same nation as you have to pursue justice across borders. And even if you do get justice, it's a really difficult task to get information fully removed from the internet. So this is something that follows victims for the rest of their life. In each country I looked at briefly, and again, this is not a legislative comparison paper, but there's frustration from people involved in the crime and victims that legislation felt quite ill-suited to this crime. In Japan, for example, there's criticisms that the specific legislation against deepfakes really didn't extend a lot of the existing legislation against obscene imagery, and it was too broad to be able to be used to prosecute against effectively. And I think the key quote that I want to zone in on is this quote from Mania in this legislative review of the EU states, and found the general kind of like intention and sentiment was that it is not a sexual offence, but only a minor privacy violation offence. Which leads me to question why we perceive this crime in a different way. This is a vastly gendered issue, and I'll return to this first, but there's also other factors at play here. In this paper, I'm looking at the differences between our physical self and our online self, and how this affects our autonomy online. Really fantastic paper by Elizabeth Engelshaus, who describes this kind of like difference in how we allocate rights and legislate online to be allocating rights to a digital proxy rather than the real person. It's a really fitting analysis for deepfake pornography. So as I've mentioned, a lot of victims do not feel this distance between their digital proxy and their physical self. And we can also look to see the digital self as kind of third dimension to the individual as like mind, body and digitality. But if we consider this an online attack on image and data, the natural kind of framework which is often viewed as informational privacy. It simply is the ability to determine what other people do with your information. Helen Nissenbaum has significant catalogue of work on this, and the distinction between public and private information is key here, and nuances of context and consent with one's information. Consent here is quite a difficult concept to apply. It's like quite a unique crime in that no level of consent is really applicable to such a violation. And we have very different regimes for how we consider this. On the other side, when we consider pushback against informational privacy, the uncomfortable categorisation of personal imagery under informational privacy could be seen to be a problem for perception or categorization of what information is. Eric Mai has an analysis of Helen Nissenbaum, where he emphasises the gravity of the social relationship in this context between public and private information as the driving motivation in treating a privacy violation. In the situation of non-consensual deepfake porn, there's a clear acute imbalance in the social interaction, so that does contextualise it in a bit more sense. When we're considering the body as well, there's a lot of work that considers informational privacy in an embodied approach and with specific reference to that. But how we treat a violation of a body and information is clearly very different. There's potential to build upon that difference, but you need to consider a different lens. Feminist theory has a lot to lend to this. Another really great project, which is called Consent to Our Data Bodies, the reference at the bottom there, by Pinyan and Veron, describes this idea of a data body, where highlighting the kind of like historical feminist relation between bodily integrity and consent and online versions of consent. And this idea and this concept of data bodies in particular introduce an interesting parallel between bodily integrity and online self in the context of deepfake pornography. So bodily integrity is concerned with the right to maintain autonomy with regard to intervention over one's body. This is a key factor in medicine when we're considering patients' rights, controlling medical intervention and be able to choose your desired treatment, but is also more commonly linked to feminist theory, and it's thoroughly interwoven into the history of patriarchal intervention in women's bodies. Anya Kovacs, the bottom reference there, has related this concept straight back to image abuse. Another quote is that victims describe the harms as similar to those arising from sexual assault as a violation of bodily integrity. Another scholar who's discussed bodily integrity in this concept is P.J. Patel-Ray, who's discussed the concept of bodily integrity specific to non-consensual pornography, so not deepfake, arguing it's a more fitting concept to apply. And I think one cannot consider fully the phenomenon of deepfake revenge pornography without taking into account that it is a vastly gendered issue, although there's different concepts and factors into how we consider this. The long history of the sexualisation of women's bodies is a constituting factor of this practice in the modern day. Relating the feminist view of bodily integrity to the crime of deepfake revenge porn, there is a clear overlap between the perception of the victim's rights to autonomy and privacy. Whereas many would use this difference to minimise the effect of revenge porn, I'm instead arguing here that we should consider the nuance of both and unite these concepts into a specific form, this idea of online bodily integrity. So we can consider this the one's right to exist online without non-consensual interference with representation of the body. And I think considering this as a right more tightly linked to our physical self and not purely a one-dimensional representation of our data and information encompasses the gravity of this violation better. It honours victims' experiences and can provide greater understanding for those who wish to combat such crime, whether it's legislation or other social action. And that's me.
Thank you for the nice talk. Interesting topic. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes. First. Yeah. First.
I see a bigger problem here in establishing my online identity. If I claim the right for protection of my online identity, should I also have a responsibility of maintaining it non-fake? Because usually my online identity is different from offline. I may be more handsome, more successful online. So I'm creating fake from the beginning.
Yeah, I think I go into this a wee bit more in the paper, but the kind of like key concept that I'm invoking about the online self is there's a big fluidity, and I think that comes back to the context and the gravity of the relationship you're talking about there. and letting the social interactions inform that gravity. And what you're describing is a very different context and gravity to these situations, and such work that should be treated differently.
That's a point I was thinking too. One scholar, she's claiming that any efforts that should be regulating unreality, because it seems that deepfakes are pretty much challenging the boundaries between truth and fake. So if there's like a new category of what we don't know anymore, was true of fake, we need a new understanding of how we protect our identity through privacy, or maybe we need a new human right. So yes, that's something that comes to my head.
Nice, I'll chase you for the reference. That sounds interesting.
Hey, there was another question.
I have a question because I'm approaching the subject from more social sciences field, so I'm not like into your law field, but from my point of view, I'm thinking if it's a discussion more about privacy, identity, but for me it's more about image that can be somehow processed online and then captured for using it in Deepfake. And I'm wondering, isn't it more a discussion about image and your cloning your voice? Is it the right approach to treat it as identity and self? Because self and identity are quite different subjects than an image. And like your voice. I know that can be part of it, but in creating your online identity and physical identity and just capturing your image, physical image, using it in Deepfake, I don't know if it's really like a matter of identity here, but I don't know what's your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think if I've understood your question correctly, the concern between, or the difference I would see between that is intent and damage. Is the impact.
It's more like about the discussion about just an image and the voice, and when you are producing a Deepfake, whether it's porn or whatever, it is not like strictly connected to identity from my point of view. But maybe I'm not right in this case. I don't know how law is seeing that case, like image. Is it part of identity? That's why you're using it and you're in the subject?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer either, so I can't. But I think I do think that is related to identity. And if someone is creating it with the purpose of damaging identity, that's the key distinction that I'm trying to make here.
Okay, any other question? If not, let's thank the speaker again and move to our next. Wait, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is. Oh, sorry.
You can.
No. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So thank you for starting the presentation, right? So we're going to now hear a paper on the promise and peril of responsible AI principles by Retno Larrazati from the Open University in the UK. Okay, now you can start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, again, thank you very much for this opportunity to present my work in progress paper at the promise and peril of responsible AI principle. Yeah, so my name is Retno Larrazati. I'm a postdoc in Knowledge Media Institute at the Open University. And I don't think I need to go to the content online. Yeah, so as artificial intelligence continues to advance, the ethical implication of its deployment have become a significant concern. And I think in the previous presentation as well, we already talked about the risks of AI, and like for example, this is in healthcare, AI-powered healthcare system may perpetuate existing biases in healthcare delivery if the algorithms are trained on biased data, and or if the designer of the algorithm are not diverse enough to identify or address potential biases there. This can result in disparities in healthcare access and outcomes for marginalized community. And it's not only healthcare, it's also in different types of applications as well. And I think, yeah, again, algorithm bias there, gender bias, race bias, and yeah, there are a lot of such cases. And again, with great power came great responsibility. So that's why various stakeholders from company to regulatory bodies are recognizing the need for responsible AI. And in response to this concern, principles and guidelines have been advocated to ensure ethical, transparent, and accountable AI use. And so we're going to talk about that more. Yeah, so organizations use various terms like trustworthy or ethical or responsible AI. The interchangeable nature of these terms reflect multifaceted principles and values underlying responsible AI development. And in this paper, I'm going to use it interchangeably, but mostly, yeah, we're going to use responsible AI. So there are different definitions of responsible AI, and however, from now on, we'll focus on these 5 key principles of responsible AI. So first is fairness. AI systems should not discriminate against individual or groups of people. Second is transparency. AI systems should be designed and operated in a manner that enables user and stakeholder to understand underlying mechanism, processes, and decisions made by the AI. And the third is safety. AI systems should be designed and tested to ensure that they are safe to use. Privacy. AI systems should not collect and use personal data in a way that is harmful. And accountability, that there should be a clear process in place to hold companies accountable for the use of AI systems. So to thoroughly examine how I want to examine the major tech companies, how they implement this responsible AI principle. This is the method that I use. So the first is the identification of target company. First is MAMA. MAMA is Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Apple. It's updated version of FANG. It used to be like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, but now it includes Microsoft instead of Netflix. But however, in this case, I also included Google DeepMind and IBM and OpenAI because those companies are also at the forefront of AI development and deployment currently with AlphaGo, Watson, and ChatGPT, obviously. And then I did the document research. Document search, so to identify it from official company website, press releases, blog posts, white papers, and other relevant sources. And yeah, the search criteria is company ethics guideline, responsible AI principles that we have. And then we collect the data and do the analysis based on the 5 key principles of responsible AI previously. And the last one is cross-referencing with PAI thematic pillars. But what is PAI? PAI is Partnership on AI, and it is a non-profit partnership of academic, civil society, industry, and media organization. So it was created in 2016, and as you can see at the end there, it was news, basically when it was first started, and it say that 2 big Silicon Valley names are missing from the alliance, and that was referring to Apple and OpenAI. But currently, right now, they already joined as a again, a member of Partnership of AI and considered as a founder as well, somehow. And yeah, those are the rest of the partner. And here are the 6 thematic pillars from them: safety, critical AI, fair, transparent, and accountable AI, labor and economy, collaboration between people and AI system, social and societal influence of AI, and AI for social good. So here are the table listed companies and AI principle and the AI thematic pillars divided by 5 key principles of responsible AI. As from what I found there, OpenAI is the only, is the one that have no mention of other key pillars other than safety. And Apple, there is no data on the responsible AI principle that they have. However, if they are one of the partnership on AI member, then we might assume that it's part of their principle as well. But yeah, these are basically how I categorize it. And yeah, this is what I talked about before. All of them are members, and those are their own phrasing of AI principles. So some of them use AI, again, AI responsible AI principles, trust and transparency principle for AI, and OpenAI use charter. And while partnership on AI has been influential in encouraging responsible AI practices, it is important to acknowledge the flaw, to use it as an indicator of true commitment of ethical AI or responsible AI. The issue of accountability arises when evaluating the implementation of the principle these companies publish. So the question of who accounts for this implementation of AI principles become again crucial, and how this internal mechanism of self-accountability, self-regulation happen. And yeah, this should include dedicated teams, government boards, or compliance framework responsible for monitoring and enforcing responsible AI practices within this organization. So like, yeah, just for example, OpenAI, this was mentioned in the previous presentation as well. And in the UK, the Competition and Market Authority actually launched an inquiry saying that they are particularly concerned about Amazon and Microsoft for cloud computing, and it's close to duopoly. And I think that is not adhered to the principle, one of the partnership on AI pillars that saying about AI economics and labor. And this is actually the ranking for digital right in 2022, which is the 6th of them. And it's their independent research, and they're basically scoring their list of 14 big tech companies. And none of the 14 digital platforms basically they evaluated earned a passing grade. And despite it's actually already having increased compared to previous years. Like, for example, this is Amazon, which is only got a 25% score. The score is evaluated more than 300 aspects of their political policies, practices, hundreds of thousand data points about firms' public commitment that affecting corporate governance. So that's the governance and freedom of expression, and also privacy. So again, those are also, if we let that low score maybe can indicate that none of this like really adhere to this, again, the principle and the principle, the responsible AI principle that they have. Moreover, again, just last week, Meta actually disbanded its responsible AI team. And again, previously, as well as AI boom, Microsoft, Twitter, they also laying off their ethics team. So this recent development basically have raised questions about the enduring nature of these commitments of their responsible AI principles. And yeah, this basically raised concern how long-term sustainability of and genuineness of their commitment to responsible AI. External entities, including regulatory bodies, industry associations, civil society organization, play a significant role to holding this tech giant accountable. I know that we were talking about policy previously, and I know there probably still lack of I don't know policies in there and law that's not covering all aspects of possible responsible AI problem and issue and risk. However, I think it is still important, and this is my next work, basically to see how they connect with each other, this self-regulation from their company and also the regulatory body. And yeah, I think that's basically it. The responsibility of companies in the AI landscape extend beyond adopting its principles. It's also require genuine commitment to uphold them. And this commitment should be evident not only in principle adoption, but also in practical implementation. And government AI policies play a vital role in shaping responsible AI development and deployment, striking a balance between fostering innovation and also safeguarding societal interests. Clear guidelines and regulation by governments contribute to a more collaborative ecosystem. Yeah, we also hope that it can encourage innovation while ensuring responsible, fair, and accountable AI development for the benefit of society as a whole. And yeah, in our evolving technological landscape, the promise and the perils of responsible AI are intertwined, and it is through ongoing discussion and evaluation and collective efforts that we navigate this complex issue. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have another 5 minutes for questions. If there are any questions, there is a question.
Hi. Well, we know that in the artificial intelligence field there is a dramatic principle to practice AI. There's a huge amount of literature about the causes of this gap. And I think one of the points that I'm very curious about is usually referred as structural isolation, that refers to the fact that entities in this organization are part of the ethical committee, ethical panel, have a few possibility to interact in the process of development of artificial intelligence system. Usually they are all person just when some scandals arise and so on. And this is a huge limitation for the implementation of ethical principle within the organization, within the development process of artificial intelligence system. And I'd like to know if in your research you have the opportunity to see if there are alternative ways to integrate edges within the operational routine of artificial intelligence development management. All the dominant models still have, the ethical committee, the ethical panel that is isolated from the rest of the job.
From my understanding, I don't know, maybe from Microsoft, you can know more about this compared to me. But yeah, again, I think they have their different separate team compared to their development. And I think, is that what your question is?
No, I was wondering if in the document that you studies, maybe as you mentioned, alternative models in which the entities could be involved more practically, more directly in the process of the development of an artificial intelligence system interacting with the computer scientists on a daily basis. Why the product, the model is developed, and not just after the development of the model, and where some scandals arise?
I think it's mostly, yeah, like for example, I'll use Google and IBM, and I think Microsoft as well. They have a lot of technical, like evaluation that they have. I think that's why their self-governance score is actually high. And but I think they also talk about like how long the testing should be and etc. But currently, I'm not really sure about that. And I think about these, scandal that happened before this. So scandal that happened, that was usually talked about in the company. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Is it okay if I come back to you later? Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Any other question at this point? If not, I can give you because it's an easy question, like you explained like a lot of the exploratory phase of your research. Where do you think you want to go next for this?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier because I want to then see closer to the implementation of what these companies do. And again, 6 months is like there are a lot of changes happening. Yes, and I also want to trying to see the regulation that is available in where their country is and see if there's any parallels there and if there's any gap there. Like for example, yeah, again, the self-regulation and the regulation available, what if it's just basically, if it's similar, then does it mean the regulation can basically check the self-regulation, but if there is something that is not there in maybe from the law or regulation, then that means there's some lacking there, or there's maybe something that's lacking in the self-regulation that we can say that there's nothing there. So that's basically what I was trying to see, yeah, again, the risk, maybe there are possible risks that is not talked about by both of the regulation and stuff. So yeah, that's the next phase, basically.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, our speaker again. We can still see this. Okay, and for the last speaker of today, I'm going to hand over to Roman Slitzar, right, on accelerating machine learning primitives on commodity hardware.
Thank you and good afternoon. I will be going against the grain because instead of creating traffic rules, I'll try to build a better car. In machine learning today, we use the fact that the only thing we can do on the computers is matrix multiplication. And you've probably heard about the lack of GPUs, they cannot produce them fast enough. The reason is GPUs are built with some specific hardware to make matrix multiplication fast. And one of the implications for me, I don't have access to GPUs because Microsoft sells all of them to paying customers. And I have to do with CPU nodes, sometimes FPGAs, so that's why I focus more on trying to find efficient algorithms on CPUs, which also have some matrix multiplication facilities. And I'm trying to exploit them as well. Several years ago, working on a problem not related to AI, I found a very efficient way of implementing the sliding window sum. And sum is a generic term, so this plus in a circle is an operation. And the key is you have an array of data points, you look at the part of it, make some computation, then you shift your window, make this computation again, and so on. And I found a way to make this sliding window computation pretty efficient. I'm usually working with the vector instructions and using vector registers in the CPUs. It's pretty easy to see how the sliding window works when I'm adding data items one by one. I can broadcast my data point, add it to the vector, then I'll have one sum ready, I'll shift the vector, and then repeat the process. It's a bit more complex if I want to process data by chunks. So I'm loading the whole vector of new data, doing something with it. And the operations I'm doing is the suffix sum and the prefix sum, which could be parallelized very well if the operation is associative. Many operations are, addition is. I originally discovered it working on sliding window minimum. That was a bioinformatics application. But I needed a hero example, so something that amazes. And from the theory of AI, we know that convolution is such an operation where the filter is actually sliding across the image. So again, trivial applications are operations like max pool and average, because maximum and addition are associative. For convolution, I had to prove that the dot product is actually a prefix sum. And it took me some time, but I figured it out. First, I'm eliminating zeros from my filter, which in practice is just masking of the vector register. So there is no work done. And then I could create this new data set, which is the pair of index in the filter and the filter itself. And you can prove that this operation is actually associative. So it means now I could unleash my algorithm on convolution. And I started with one-dimensional implementation. And as you can see, the speed up that I achieved over the state of the art, and for the state of the art, I've used Onyx framework, which is owned by Microsoft. That's why it was easy for me to find the people who are responsible for this, who explain me how it works, so I can actually tweak it. But the speed up is proportional to the logarithm of the filter size. And what's the state of the art? If you are using PyTorch on the CPU today, it goes into Intel 1DNN framework, which is performing matrix multiplication. And this is called the roofline analysis graph. So on the x-axis is arithmetic intensity of my loop, which means how many operations I do per byte loaded from memory. And y-axis is flops, operations per second that CPU is doing. And this is matrix multiplication. The top line is the speed of light, which means like maximum flops that CPU is capable of. And the slanted lines are the memory speeds. So you can see that matrix multiplication basically operates at the speed of memory, which is not surprising because there are very few operations per element loaded from the memory. And y-axis is logarithmic. So the difference between the current implementation and the speed of light is dramatic. There's lots of improvements. How are my kernels doing? They're a bit better because there is more arithmetic intensity, but they're still operating with the speed of memory. If you make the kernel wider, and I have a very specific case with a filter size of 51. So, and it was described actually by Intel, because they're also trying to improve the performance of their CPUs, and they're trying to prove the world that CPUs are competitive with the GPUs. This was again bioinformatics application, filter size 51, dilation by 8, so it means the effective size is about 400. And in this case, I matched Intel speed up, and also there are claims in the Intel paper that this is comparable with the GPUs in speed, and which is also important in energy consumed. More interesting case though, and more practical, is two-dimensional convolution. And I'm again roughly support logarithmic in my improvement. There are two interesting data points. Of course, the most interesting points are kernel size 3 and 5, because they're actually most used in practical deep neural network like AlexNet or SNet. And the second question that still puzzles me, blue line is one implementation where all my data fits in one CPU vector register. And orange line is the situation where my filter is larger than one register, so I implemented it differently. And for some reason, it is faster. Like on filter size 17, I can do both algorithms. So I'm working on a way to bring this line up in hopes that actually the whole line will move up, and I'll get more improvement. And as for execution time, I'm in the speed of light. So I'm taking everything from the CPU that is physically possible. While analyzing this performance, I try to find why I'm faster. Because I'm doing the same number of operations as the state of the art. But I am accessing memory in a more efficient way. Which means, and also important fact that today's state of the art creates a special matrix that is then multiplied. The process is called image to column. And it takes more memory than the original representation of data. I'm operating on original representation, which means I'm using less memory. And I'm using it more efficiently. And in today's computer systems, the most power consumption is actually from the memory, not from your CPU. That's why GPUs are so power hungry. Which means with my algorithm, I can actually A, stay with the CPU, and B, stay with a small system, which is especially important for embedded applications, like Internet of Things. And that's where this algorithm is most promising. I can use a small ARM device, maybe without a GPU at all, use less memory and use less power. That's why I'm talking about commodity hardware and democratization. More devices with the built-in AI capabilities. Next interesting topics is actually implementing Fourier transform with this algorithm. It is pretty well known that you can implement convolution with a discrete Fourier transform. Interestingly enough, you can actually implement Fourier transform with convolution. And that's where my algorithm might work. And this gives me an inroad into accelerating transformers, which are the large language models, because when I'm talking now about convolution in my algorithm, everybody says, this is interesting. What about the transformer? But nobody cares about convolution anymore. Although there are multiple applications with embedded devices, like all the security cameras with face recognition, they're still using the convolutional neural networks. And it will not change in the near future because the convolution is multidimensional by design and transformers are one-dimensional. If you want to learn more, you can follow my online identity on Archive and GitHub to get more details about algorithm and implementations. That's it, thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation and talk. Are there any questions?
So, very interesting. I was wondering if, I mean, since you're switching from one hardware to the other, and we know that like GPUs in general, AI models they need a lot of computational power. My question was, what are we saving not only in terms of time, but also in terms of energy, carbon footprint, for example? Like, it's something that you measure, that you're planning to.
I was not able to make apples-to-apples comparison because I couldn't find a single system with a powerful CPU and a GPU in it.
Yeah.
But what Intel claims in their paper is that 2 CPU server, which consumes about 300 watts, is now comparable with a GPU card that uses about 700 watts. Again, this is not true comparison because the servers that you have in the racks have 8 CPUs, 8 GPUs at the same time. So there are 3 kilowatt machines. And today you cannot put that many CPUs in a single rack. So even for high power, high performance application, it's hard to compare. But also there are applications, for example, in language models, when the model does not fit into the GPU memory. So you have to resort to the CPU anyways. And that's what I'm trying to improve as well.
Any other questions? I have a question since I read the paper and while I was reading it, it was very convincing, yeah, as far as I could follow it. And I was wondering why this is not the major breakthrough in the sense that, I understand that there's a big incentive to keep the things the way they are at the moment, but if this actually scales up, as you say, for transformer models, for large language models, then this could be a very big solution. Currently people are trying to make these models smaller, quantization, and these things like this that already show improvement when it comes to energy consumption and efficiency. But this struck me as something I was like, okay, then why are we not moving towards this?
Well, we are. Right now, I'm moving alone.
Okay.
And to do this proof of concept took about 30,000 lines of code in Intrinsics. So it's basically assembly language. I need a bigger team.
Okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah.
Can this be implemented for quantum computing? It will be useful or not?
Quantum computing machine learning is very different. Like the basic idea in machine learning is let's scramble the data in some way that is differential. And convolution, I'm convinced that convolution came in as an accident. Transformer is a bit more designed, but I think also an accident. There is a lot of, like a posse of monkeys typing on keyboards trying to, in hopes that they create Encyclopedia Britannica. So machine learning researchers are typing on keyboards, creating models, creating different mathematical concepts in hopes that the model works. So quantum computing is just another way. Again, they're coming with a pretty random scrambling schemas. The advantage is that they're always differential by design. They're like unitary matrices. Works beautiful. We don't have quantum computing yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And last, you point out that your algorithm approach can be useful for IoT application. Could it be possible for you to explain a little better how this algorithm approach would be very interesting in that case?
IoT tends to use small CPUs and very little power. And I'm giving you more compute with less power consumption. That's why it could make IoT devices a little bit better, a little bit more intelligent. And even today, I think they're running large language models on Raspberry Pi already. So it's a small ARM device, but you can use a lot of brain power.
Okay. Let's thank our speaker. You want to announce? I give the floor to you.
I just did. Thank you everyone for sticking around until now. We know it's getting late, but if you still feel like it, we're going to go to Bar Mercato, which is 3 minutes away by walk. And I saw most of you actually joined the group on WhatsApp, so we're going to put it there too. In case you're not on there, the address of the bar is also on the conference website. So if you're interested, do join us there for a chat and to relax and to chat more maybe about the research we've seen today. And yeah, that's it for today. We're going to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m., right? Yes. Same room. As I told you before, the main entrance will be closed. That meaning you can still enter from the same door. You're just going to have to use the side stairs. But we're going to make sure to put anything for you to be guided, and it will be clear, okay? Thank you so much for coming, and see you at the bar. Bye-bye.